2 full years passed, and Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile when out of the river there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up out of the Nile and stood beside those on the riverbank. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek, fat cows. Then the Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy, full heads. Then the Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. In the morning, Pharaoh's mind was troubled, so he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them for him. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh,
"Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was impaled."
So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph,
"I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it."
"I cannot do it."
Joseph replied to Pharaoh,
"But God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires."
Then Pharaoh told Joseph his dreams, and Joseph said to Pharaoh,
"The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterward are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered, because the famine that follows it will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country, to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine."
The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. So Pharaoh asked them,
"Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?"
Then Pharaoh said to Joseph,
"Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you."
So Pharaoh said to Joseph,
"I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt."
Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and people shouted before him, "Make way!" Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentifully. Joseph collected all the food produced in those 7 years of abundance in Egypt and stored it in the cities. In each city, he put the food grown in the fields surrounding it. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain, like the sand of the sea. It was so much that he stopped keeping records because it was beyond measure. The 7 years of abundance in Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in all the other lands, but in the whole land of Egypt there was food. When all Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. Then Pharaoh told all the Egyptians,
"Go to Joseph and do what he tells you."
When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout Egypt. And all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe everywhere. Joseph's wisdom and foresight saved not only Egypt, but also the surrounding nations from starvation. He was reconciled with his brothers who came to Egypt seeking food, and they bowed down to him, fulfilling the dreams Joseph had shared so many years before. Through all his trials, Joseph remained faithful to God, and in the end, he was richly rewarded. When Joseph's brothers first arrived in Egypt, they did not recognize him, for many years had passed since they had sold him into slavery. Joseph, however, knew who they were and decided to test them. He accused them of being spies and had them thrown into prison for 3 days. On the 3rd day, he told them that one brother must remain in Egypt while the others returned to Canaan with grain for their families. He kept Simeon as a hostage and instructed them to bring their youngest brother Benjamin back with them to prove their honesty. The brothers were filled with remorse and said to one another,
"Surely we are being punished because of our brother Joseph. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen. That's why this distress has come on us."
Joseph turned away from them and wept, but he did not reveal his identity. Instead, he had their sacks filled with grain and secretly returned their silver to them. When the brothers discovered the silver, they were terrified, fearing that they would be accused of theft. Upon their return to Canaan, they told their father Jacob all that had happened. Jacob was distraught at the thought of losing another son and refused to let Benjamin go back to Egypt. But as the famine persisted, the family's food supply dwindled, and they were left with no choice. Judah, one of Joseph's brothers, promised Jacob that he would personally ensure Benjamin's safety. Reluctantly, Jacob agreed. And the brothers set out for Egypt with Benjamin. When they arrived, Joseph invited them to his house and prepared a feast. The brothers were astonished when they were seated in order of their ages, from the eldest to the youngest, and they marveled at how the Egyptian ruler knew so much about them. After the meal, Joseph instructed his steward to fill their sacks with as much grain as they could carry, and to put each man's silver in the mouth of his sack. He also commanded the steward to place his own silver cup in Benjamin's sack. At dawn, the brothers set off for Canaan. But before they had gone far, Joseph's steward caught up with them. "Why have you repaid good with evil?" he demanded. "This is not how you repay my master's kindness. The cup from which he drinks and also uses for divination is missing." The brothers were shocked and denied any wrongdoing.
"If any of your servants is found to have the cup, he will die, and the rest of us will become my lord's slaves,"
they declared. But when the steward searched their sacks, the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. In despair, the brothers tore their clothes and returned to the city. They threw themselves before Joseph, pleading for mercy. Judah, in particular, offered to take Benjamin's place as a slave, saying,
"How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? No, do not let me see the misery that would come on my father."
At this, Joseph could no longer control his emotions. He ordered everyone to leave the room except his brothers. Then he revealed his identity, saying,
I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?
His brothers were too stunned to speak.
Come close to me,
Joseph said. When they had done so, he continued,
I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now, do not be distressed or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance.
Joseph embraced his brothers, weeping with joy, and they were reconciled. He instructed them to return to Canaan and bring their father and their families to Egypt, where they would be provided for during the remaining years of famine. Pharaoh himself heard about Joseph's brothers and offered them the best of the land. The brothers returned to Canaan and told Jacob the incredible news.
Joseph is still alive. In fact, he is ruler of all Egypt.
Jacob was stunned. He could not believe it. But when he saw the wagons Joseph had sent to carry him to Egypt, his spirit revived, and he said,
I'm convinced my son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die.
Jacob and all his family set out for Egypt. And God spoke to Jacob in a vision at night, saying,
Jacob, Jacob, I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will surely bring you back again. And Joseph's own hand will close your eyes.
When Jacob arrived in Egypt, Joseph went to Goshen to meet him. As soon as Joseph appeared before him, he threw his arms around his father and wept for a long time. Jacob said to Joseph,
Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive."
Joseph settled his father and brothers in the region of Goshen, the best part of Egypt, where they prospered and grew in number. Jacob lived in Egypt for 17 more years, and before he died, he blessed each of his sons, giving a special blessing to Joseph's 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Jacob was buried in the cave of Machpelah in the land of Canaan alongside his ancestors. After his death, Joseph's brothers feared that he might seek revenge for the wrongs they had done to him. They came to him, bowed down, and offered themselves as his slaves. But Joseph reassured them, saying,
"Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children."
Joseph lived to the age of 110 years. He saw the 3rd generation of Ephraim's children and the children of Machir, son of Manasseh, who were placed at birth on Joseph's knees. Before his death, Joseph said to his brothers,
"I am about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob."
And Joseph made the Israelites swear an oath, saying,
"God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place."
So Joseph died at the age of 110, and after they embalmed him, he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. And so, the story of Joseph concludes with a legacy of faith, forgiveness, and fulfillment of God's promises, a story that would be remembered and told for generations, inspiring all who hear it to trust in God's providence and plan. If you enjoyed watching this video, consider pressing the like button, and please support our channel by sharing our videos and dropping your thoughts and prayers in the comment section.